Blood dripped from Lyra's split lip onto the polished marble floor of the throne room. Each crimson drop echoed in the vast space as two guards dragged her forward, her bare feet barely touching the ground. She should have been terrified. Everyone knew what happened to wolves who disappointed the Alpha King. But as they hauled her before the most feared ruler in werewolf history, Lyra felt nothing but hollow numbness. King Darius Blackthorn sat motionless on his obsidian throne, a mountain of controlled violence wrapped in expensive black leather. His silver eyes, cold as winter moonlight, tracked her approach with the predatory focus of an apex predator sizing up prey. At 6'6" with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun, he commanded the room without saying a word. The guards released her, and Lyra crumpled to her knees. Protocol demanded she keep her eyes down, show submission, grovel for mercy. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his stare directly. The reaction was immediate and electric. Darius's nostrils flared as he leaned forward, searching for something that should have been there. His brow furrowed. Then his expression shifted to something far more dangerous, confusion. Where is her scent? The question rumbled from his chest like distant thunder. Beta Marcus, standing rigid beside the throne, cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, she's broken. The Crescent Moon Pack claims she lost her scent after a fever 3 months ago. Darius rose from his throne in one fluid motion, descending the dais with predatory grace. Every wolf in the room took an involuntary step back, except Lyra. She remained perfectly still as he circled her like a wolf studying wounded prey. Look at me, he commanded. She was already looking. Had been since the moment they dragged her in. While other Omegas cowered and trembled in his presence, this small, damaged female met his gaze with steady defiance that made his wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. Fenris, his wolf, had been silent for over a century. The beast had rejected every potential mate the council had paraded before them, content to let Darius rule alone. But now, as the Alpha King studied this broken Omega, Fenris stirred with interest for the first time in decades. What pack sent you? Darius asked, though he already knew the answer. Crescent Moon, Your Majesty. Her voice was soft but steady. No tremor, no fear. Just quiet resignation that intrigued him more than 1,000 sobbing pleas ever could. Alpha Vincent Thorne stepped forward from the line of visiting pack leaders, his bulky frame radiating nervous energy. Your Majesty, I present my daughter, Lyra. She's damaged goods, I'm afraid, but perhaps suitable for your lesser needs. Darius's lip curled in disgust. Not at the girl, but at her father. The contempt in Vincent's voice when speaking of his own daughter made the Alpha King's protective instincts flare in a way that caught him off guard. He crouched before Lyra, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, he could see the fine scars that traced her jawline, the careful way she held her left arm, the faint purple bruising that makeup couldn't quite hide. Someone had hurt her. Repeatedly. Mine, Fenris snarled suddenly, so violently that Darius nearly staggered. The word ricocheted through his mind with startling intensity. His wolf had never claimed anything, or anyone, in 3 centuries of existence. Tell me about this fever, Darius said quietly, his silver eyes never leaving hers. Lyra's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There's nothing to tell, Your Majesty. I got sick. I got better. My scent never returned. It was a lie. He could sense the deception rolling off her in waves, even without her scent to guide him. But there was something else there too, fear. Not of him, but of something else entirely. Stand up, he ordered. She obeyed slowly, favoring her right leg. As she rose, the loose fabric of her simple dress shifted, and Darius caught sight of more scars along her collarbone. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Kill them all, Fenris demanded, sensing the abuse she'd endured. Tear apart anyone who hurt her. The violence of his wolf's reaction was unprecedented. In 3 centuries, Fenris had never shown protective instincts toward anyone except Darius himself. Now the beast was ready to wage war over a damaged Omega they'd known for less than 5 minutes. You will stay, Darius announced, his decision surprising everyone in the room, including himself. Alpha Vincent's face went pale. Your Majesty, surely you don't want. I wasn't asking your opinion. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as Darius fixed his lethal stare on Vincent. The Omega stays. The rest of you are dismissed. The visiting alphas filed out quickly, but Vincent lingered. Your Majesty, perhaps I should explain. Now. The single word carried enough menace to make even an alpha flee. When the throne room emptied except for his most trusted guards and Beta Marcus, Darius turned his attention back to Lyra. She stood exactly where he'd left her, watching him with those unsettling steady eyes. Are you going to tell me the truth now? He asked. I told you the truth, Your Majesty. You told me facts. Not the same thing. He began circling her again, noting how she tracked his movement without turning her head. Smart. Aware. A wolf doesn't simply lose their scent from fever. It's biologically impossible. She said nothing, but he caught the slight tremor in her hands before she clasped them behind her back. Someone did this to you, he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Someone suppressed your scent deliberately. The question is why? Still silence. But her pulse had quickened, he could see it beating rapidly in the hollow of her throat. She's protecting someone, Fenris observed. Or hiding something. Marcus, Darius called without taking his eyes off Lyra. Yes, Your Majesty. Prepare the East Wing guest quarters. Our visitor will be staying indefinitely. Sir, protocol dictates that unmated Omegas. I don't care about protocol. Darius's voice carried a growl that made every wolf present bare their throats in submission. She stays where I can keep an eye on her. For the first time since entering the throne room, genuine fear flickered across Lyra's features. But it wasn't fear of him, it was fear of staying, of being discovered, of something she was desperately trying to hide. Please, she whispered, the first crack in her composure. Send me back. No. The refusal came swift and final. Something was wrong here, beyond the obvious abuse she'd suffered. His instincts, honed by 3 centuries of ruling through treachery and war, were screaming warnings he couldn't yet decipher. And beneath it all, Fenris paced with increasing agitation, drawn to this broken female in a way that defied all logic. As guards moved to escort Lyra to her new quarters, she cast one last look over her shoulder. In that brief moment, Darius saw something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't submission or gratitude in her eyes. It was the look of a predator who'd just walked into a trap, and wasn't sure if she was the hunter or the prey. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Dawn broke over the Blackthorn compound with deceptive serenity. Lyra stood at the window of her assigned quarters in the East Wing, watching the pack's morning training rituals unfold in the courtyard below. Warriors moved through combat forms with lethal precision while younger wolves practiced shifting under the watchful eyes of their instructors. She should have been grateful for the reprieve. The guest quarters were more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever lived. Silk curtains, a 4-poster bed that could sleep 6 wolves comfortably, and a private bathroom with a clawfoot tub that called to her aching muscles. But luxury felt like a cage when you knew the door was locked from the outside. A sharp knock interrupted her brooding. Enter, she called, not bothering to turn from the window. Beta Marcus stepped inside, his expression carefully neutral. His Majesty requests your presence at morning training. Lyra's stomach clenched. She'd been hoping to avoid the pack dynamics for as long as possible, but apparently the Alpha King had other plans. Is that a request or a command? With King Darius, there's rarely a difference. Marcus gestured toward the door. Suitable training attire has been provided. You have 10 minutes. After he left, Lyra found the clothes laid out on her bed, form-fitting black leggings and a matching sports bra that would leave her scars visible to everyone. Her hands trembled as she changed, memories of past training sessions flooding back. The Crescent Moon Pack's idea of combat preparation had involved using her as a living punching bag. This is different, she told herself. He won't let them hurt you. Not yet. But even as she thought it, she wasn't sure why King Darius would protect her. Powerful men didn't keep broken toys unless they served a purpose. The training grounds buzzed with activity when she arrived. Conversations died as wolves caught sight of her, replaced by the familiar mixture of disdain and curiosity she'd grown accustomed to. At least 50 pack members had gathered for the morning session, from teenage pups testing their shifting abilities to seasoned warriors who could tear apart enemies with their bare hands. King Darius stood at the center of it all, commanding attention without effort. Gone was the formal leather from yesterday's throne room encounter. Instead, he wore simple black training pants that showcased his powerful physique and a tight-fitting shirt that did nothing to hide the corded muscles of his arms and chest. When his silver eyes found hers across the courtyard, Lyra felt that same electric jolt from their first meeting. Focus, she commanded herself. Survive first, feel later. Lyra. His voice carried easily across the space, and every head turned toward her. Join the Omega group for basic conditioning. She nodded and moved toward the cluster of young wolves doing stretching exercises under the supervision of a stern-faced female instructor. But as she walked, something felt wrong. Her vision blurred slightly, and her steps became unsteady. The poison, she'd gone too long without a dose, and her body was starting to rebel. Begin with running, the instructor announced. 3 miles around the compound perimeter. The group took off at an easy lope that should have been manageable for any healthy wolf. Lyra pushed herself to keep up, ignoring the growing fire in her chest and the way her limbs felt increasingly heavy. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool morning air. Just keep moving, she told herself. Don't show weakness. But her body had other plans. Halfway through the second mile, her legs gave out without warning. She hit the ground hard, gasping as pain lanced through her chest like she'd been stabbed. The other runners stopped, forming a circle around her prone form. Get the physician, someone shouted. No, Lyra tried to say, but the word came out as barely a whisper. Darkness crept around the edges of her vision as her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. Then it happened. The poison that had suppressed her true nature for years suddenly faltered, like a dam cracking under immense pressure. For 30 seconds that would change everything, her real scent exploded outward like a nuclear bomb of pure Omega power. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Every wolf within a mile radius dropped to their knees as if struck by divine command. Seasoned warriors who had never bowed to anyone except their alpha king found themselves prostrate on the ground, whimpering with desperate need to serve, to protect, to worship the source of that intoxicating fragrance. But it was King Darius's reaction that truly terrified everyone present. A sound erupted from his throat, part growl, part howl, entirely inhuman. His carefully controlled facade shattered like glass as Fenris clawed for dominance. His eyes shifted from silver to pure wolf gold, and his canines elongated as the beast within demanded immediate claiming rights. Mine, he roared, the word echoing with supernatural power that made the very air vibrate. His body began the shift toward his wolf form, muscles rippling and bones beginning to crack and reshape. If Marcus hadn't tackled him from behind, pinning him with desperate strength, Darius would have completed the transformation and claimed Lyra right there in front of his entire pack. The beta used every ounce of his own alpha power to hold his king back, whispering urgent commands that barely penetrated the red haze of Fenris's possessive fury. Darius, stop. Not here, not like this. The scent lasted exactly 30 seconds before vanishing as completely as it had appeared, leaving behind only the faint trace of sickness that had been masking it. But those 30 seconds had revealed a truth that would reshape the supernatural world. Lyra was a true Omega. The bloodline that had been hunted to extinction over 2 centuries ago, the genetic miracle that could command even alpha kings with nothing more than their scent. She wasn't just broken, she was the most powerful wolf alive, and someone had been systematically poisoning her to hide that fact. Dr. Helena arrived within minutes, her medical bag clutched tightly as she pushed through the crowd of still kneeling wolves. The elderly physician had served the Blackthorn pack for over 60 years, and nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she found. Lyra lay unconscious in the center of the courtyard, her skin pale as death and her breathing shallow. But it was the residual power still clinging to her unconscious form that made Helena's hands shake as she checked for vital signs. "Get her to the medical wing," she ordered sharply. "Now." King Darius had regained enough control to shift back to human form, but his eyes remained wild with barely contained violence. "What is she?" he demanded, his voice rough from the near transformation. "Not here," Helena replied grimly, casting meaningful glances at the crowd of pack members still struggling to their feet. "We need privacy for this conversation." An hour later, they gathered in Helena's private office, Darius, Marcus, and the doctor herself. Lyra remained unconscious in the adjacent medical bay, connected to monitors that tracked her failing vital signs. "Wolfsbane poisoning," Helena announced without preamble. "Systematic, deliberate, and administered in carefully calculated doses over what I estimate to be at least 5 years. Possibly longer." Darius's hands clenched into fists. "Explain." "Someone has been feeding her wolfsbane extract regularly, not to kill her, but to suppress her true nature. It's the only way to mask the scent signature of a true Omega." Helena's clinical tone couldn't hide her horror. "They weren't just abusing her, Your Majesty. They were preparing her." "For what?" "To be sold. A true Omega is worth more than entire kingdoms to the right buyer. With her power fully suppressed, she would appear to be just another damaged Omega to casual inspection. But once the poison cleared her system..." Helena shook her head grimly. "She could command armies. Could force even you to submit if she knew how to use her abilities properly." Marcus paced the small office like a caged wolf. "The Crescent Moon Pack. They had to know what she was." "Oh, they knew." Darius's voice carried deadly certainty. "Vincent Thorne has been playing a very dangerous game. The question is, who was he planning to sell her to?" But Helena wasn't finished with her revelations. "There's more. The poisoning, it's killing her. Years of wolfsbane exposure have damaged her organs beyond normal healing capabilities. If we don't begin detox immediately, she'll be dead within weeks." The silence that followed was deafening. "What does detox involve?" Darius asked finally. "Complete system cleansing, which will be excruciatingly painful as her body purges the toxins. She'll need constant care, and..." Helena hesitated. "Her scent will return gradually. Not in controlled bursts like today, but slowly building until she reaches full potency. Every unmated wolf within 100 miles will be drawn to her. Every alpha will want to claim her. Every enemy pack will try to steal or kill her." Marcus stopped pacing. "The other alpha kings will demand access to her. They'll see her as a threat to their own power, or as a weapon to be possessed." "Let them try," Darius growled, Fenris's possessiveness bleeding through. "She's under my protection." "Protection?" Marcus stared at his king with concern. "Darius, think about what you're saying. If word gets out that you're harboring a true Omega, every pack in North America will unite against you. They'll declare war to either kill her or claim her for themselves. Then they'll die. And what about the throne? Your crown? Everything you've built over 3 centuries? Darius was quiet for a long moment, staring through the glass window at Lyra's still form. She looked so small and fragile connected to those machines, nothing like the legendary weapon of mass destruction she apparently was. "Mine," Fenris whispered in his mind. "Protect her. Claim her. Kill anyone who tries to take her." His wolf's certainty was absolute, but the political ramifications were staggering. As Alpha King, he ruled through strength and the careful balance of power between packs. A true Omega would disrupt that balance completely. But when he thought about Vincent Thorne slowly poisoning his own daughter, preparing to sell her like livestock to the highest bidder, something cold and furious settled in his chest. "Begin the detox," he ordered. Helena nodded grimly. "It will take weeks, possibly months. And that's assuming she survives the initial purge. Her body is so weakened. She'll survive. Darius's voice carried absolute conviction. I'll make sure of it. And when the other alphas come? Marcus pressed. When they demand access to her or threaten war? King Darius Blackthorn smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression either of his companions had ever seen. Then they'll discover exactly why I've held this throne for 3 centuries. No one touches what's mine. As if summoned by his declaration, alarms began sounding throughout the compound. Marcus's radio crackled to life with urgent reports from the perimeter guards. Multiple vehicles approaching the main gate, sir. Looks like Alpha delegations from the Northern Territories, the coastal packs, and... The guard's voice cracked slightly. The Western Alliance, sir. They're all flying formal parley flags. Marcus met his king's eyes with grim understanding. They felt it. Her scent carried farther than we thought. Darius nodded slowly. Word of a true Omega would spread like wildfire through the supernatural community. By nightfall, every major pack leader in the continent would know about Lyra's existence. The game had changed, and the stakes were now higher than the throne itself. They were playing for the future of all werewolf kind, with a dying girl as the ultimate prize. Through the window, they watched as the first convoy of vehicles rolled through the compound gates. More would follow, allies and enemies alike, all drawn by 30 seconds of scent that had revealed the most dangerous secret in the supernatural world. Lyra stirred slightly on her medical bed, unconscious but somehow sensing the approaching storm. In a few hours, she would wake up to discover that her entire world had changed. She was no longer just a broken Omega. She was the most hunted creature alive. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. The War Council chamber had never felt smaller. 3 massive screens displayed aerial footage of the army surrounding the Blackthorn compound, each encampment representing centuries of pack alliances and territorial power. The Northern Territories under Alpha Constantine had positioned themselves across the main highway, cutting off the primary escape route. The coastal packs controlled the eastern perimeter, while the Western Alliance had claimed the southern approach. All told, nearly 2,000 wolves had converged on King Darius's stronghold within 18 hours of Lyra's scent revelation. They're not here to negotiate, Marcus observed grimly, studying the tactical displays. This is a siege formation. Darius stood at the head of the conference table, his silver eyes tracking troop movements with the calculated precision of a warrior who'd survived 3 centuries of conflict. But beneath his composed exterior, something else entirely was happening. Something that threatened to shatter his legendary control. Pain. Not his own, but hers. Lyra's agony from the detox process crashed through him in waves, each spasm of her poisoned body registering in his nervous system like phantom wounds. Dr. Helena had warned him that true Omega bonds were unlike anything in werewolf physiology, but she hadn't prepared him for this, the complete dissolution of the barriers between his consciousness and Lyra's. Your Majesty. Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. The Northern delegation is requesting another audience. Darius blinked, forcing himself back to the present crisis. Constantine can request all he wants. My answer remains the same. Sir, with respect, we're outnumbered nearly 4 to 1. Perhaps we should consider. Consider what? Darius's voice dropped to the dangerous whisper that had made Alpha Kings tremble. Handing over a dying girl to monsters? Before Marcus could respond, another wave of Lyra's suffering hit Darius like a physical blow. This time, it wasn't just pain, it was memory. A flash of Vincent Thorne's fist connecting with a 13-year-old girl's face, the taste of blood, the desperate scramble to hide under a bed that offered no real protection. Darius gripped the edge of the conference table, his knuckles white with strain. The wood began to splinter under his supernatural strength. Sire? Captain Reynolds, his head of security, stepped forward with obvious concern. Are you fine? The word came out strangled. Status report on our defenses. As Reynolds briefed the room on patrol schedules and ammunition counts, Darius found himself fighting a battle on two fronts. Externally, he projected the image of an unshakable alpha king. Internally, he was drowning in emotions that weren't his own. Another memory surfaced: Lyra, perhaps 16, forced to kneel in the center of the crescent moon pack circle while Vincent announced that she was broken goods, unworthy of a true mating. The humiliation had cut deeper than any physical wound, especially when she'd seen pack members she'd considered friends nod in agreement. "Stop," Darius commanded his wolf. "I can't fight wars while living through her trauma." But Fenris was beyond reason. The beast had claimed Lyra as mate, and that bond was amplifying every sensation she experienced. There was no shutting it off, no returning to the emotional isolation that had protected Darius for centuries. "Sir, there's something else." Marcus's tone carried an odd note that made Darius focus sharply on his beta. "I've been monitoring communications between the enemy camps. They're not just here for the girl." "Explain." "They know about the bond. Somehow they've learned that she's affecting you, making you vulnerable." Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. "They're planning to exploit that weakness." Darius's eyes narrowed. "How could they know about something that even we don't fully understand?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Information leaks, perhaps. We have pack members with family connections to other territories. It's impossible to maintain perfect security." Before Darius could probe deeper, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Dr. Helena: "Need you in medical immediately. Lyra's condition critical." The council meeting dissolved as Darius strode from the chamber, Marcus falling into step beside him. But as they walked the corridors toward the medical wing, the beta's mind was racing with calculations that had nothing to do with loyalty. 3 hours, Marcus told himself. Just hold it together for 3 more hours. In the medical bay, they found Helena working frantically over Lyra's convulsing form. The girl's back arched off the bed as toxins fought to leave her system, her face a mask of agony even in unconsciousness. "The wolfsbane is fighting back," Helena explained tersely. "Her body is trying to reject the detox. If we can't stabilize her soon." Darius moved to Lyra's bedside without conscious thought. The moment his hand touched her burning forehead, 2 things happened simultaneously: her convulsions eased, and he gasped as her memories flooded his mind with devastating clarity. Age 8, Vincent explaining that Mommy went away because Lyra was a disappointment. Age 12, the first training session, where pack warriors used her as a practice target. Age 15, the night she realized the medicine that made her better was actually poison designed to keep her weak. Age 19, Vincent's drunken confession that she was worth more broken than she'd ever be whole. Each memory hit Darius like a physical blow, but he held on, pouring his own strength into the bond that connected them. Gradually, her breathing steadied and the toxic flush left her cheeks. "Remarkable," Helena whispered. "Your presence is actually helping her body process the poison. How is that possible?" Alpha King bonds are legendary for their healing properties, but this is beyond anything documented. She's not just your mate, your majesty. She's your perfect genetic complement. Your wolves were literally designed to heal each other. Marcus watched this exchange with carefully hidden revulsion. The great King Darius, reduced to a nursemaid for damaged goods. It was exactly the kind of weakness that would destroy everything they'd built. The kingdom needs a strong leader, Marcus told himself. Not a lovesick fool. "I should return to the War Council," he said aloud. "The enemy delegations will need an answer soon." Darius nodded absently, his attention focused entirely on Lyra. "Handle the initial negotiations. Stall for time." "Of course, sire." But Marcus had no intention of stalling. As he left the medical wing, he sent a carefully coded message to Alpha Constantine: "Package ready for pickup. Delivery window opens at midnight." The reply came within minutes: "Excellent. Your compensation will be transferred upon receipt. The Northern Territories look forward to your service as Second Alpha." Marcus deleted both messages and smiled grimly. By tomorrow morning, the Blackthorn Kingdom would have a new ruler, and the dangerous True Omega would be safely contained under Constantine's control. It was the logical solution to an impossible situation. He just had to keep Darius distracted for 6 more hours. At 11:30 p.m., Marcus returned to the medical wing carrying a steaming mug of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he told his king, who hadn't left Lyra's side in hours. Darius accepted the drink gratefully. The bond with Lyra was growing stronger by the hour, allowing him to monitor her healing progress but also leaving him mentally exhausted. The coffee smelled like salvation. He drained half the mug before he realized something was wrong. The room began to spin slightly, and his supernatural senses dulled to almost human levels. "Marcus?" Darius tried to stand, but his legs wobbled treacherously. "What?" "I'm sorry, my friend." Marcus's voice carried genuine regret. "But you've lost perspective. The kingdom needs a leader who can think clearly, not someone compromised by mate bonds." Betrayal. The word hit Darius harder than the drug coursing through his system. Marcus, his friend for over 2 centuries, the man who'd stood beside him through wars and political upheavals, had poisoned him. "You don't understand," Darius slurred, fighting the sedative with every ounce of his supernatural will. "She's not just, she's a weapon that's making you weak." Marcus moved toward Lyra's unconscious form. "Constantine has promised to treat her well. She'll be valued for her abilities, not coddled like a pet." "No." The word screamed through Darius's mind, and apparently through the bond, because Lyra's eyes snapped open for the first time in days. She took in the scene instantly. Darius struggling against pharmaceutical chains, Marcus reaching for her 4 lines, the sound of vehicles approaching outside. Her detox-weakened body should have been helpless, but rage was a powerful motivator. "Get away from him," she said quietly. Marcus laughed. "You can barely sit up, little Omega. Save your energy." That was his first mistake. Lyra was no longer the completely suppressed girl who'd arrived 2 days ago. Hours of detox had cleared enough wolfsbane from her system to allow glimpses of her true power. Her second mistake was underestimating what a true Omega could do when someone threatened her mate. The scent that exploded from Lyra wasn't the overwhelming tsunami from the training grounds. This was focused, precise, and absolutely lethal in its intent. It wrapped around Marcus like invisible chains, dropping him to his knees as his wolf submitted completely to her dominance. "I said get away from him." This time, her voice carried the supernatural command that could bend alpha kings to her will. Marcus tried to resist, his own alpha nature warring against her compulsion. But he was no match for bloodline power that had been extinct for centuries. His body betrayed him, crawling backward until he hit the far wall. Outside, vehicle doors slammed and heavy boots pounded toward the medical wing. Constantine's forces, right on schedule. Lyra forced herself out of the hospital bed, her legs shaking but functional. The 4-pole became a makeshift weapon as she positioned herself between the door and Darius's drugged form. "How many?" she asked Marcus, her Omega power still holding him immobile. 12, he gasped. "Armed assault team." "Good. I was hoping for a challenge." The first wave of attackers burst through the door expecting to find a helpless girl and an unconscious king. Instead, they walked into a nightmare scenario their intelligence had never prepared them for. Lyra's power hit them like a wall of supernatural force. 6 hardened warriors, wolves who'd served in territorial wars, dropped their weapons and fell to their knees in helpless submission. But her control was still untrained, wild with emotion and trauma. Instead of simple dominance, her power carried echoes of every abuse she'd suffered. The attacking wolves began to experience her memories, every beating, every humiliation, every moment of despair, as if they were living through it themselves. Screams filled the medical wing as grown warriors curled into fetal positions, overwhelmed by psychic pain that had accumulated over years of systematic torture. It was psychological warfare at its most brutal, and Lyra had no idea how to stop it. "Enough!" Darius roared, fighting through the sedative with sheer force of will. His king's command cut through Lyra's rage-fueled power display, snapping her back to awareness. The attacking wolves lay unconscious or catatonic, their minds temporarily shattered by experiences no wolf was meant to endure. Outside, more vehicles arrived as backup teams realized their initial assault had failed. How many more? Darius demanded, hauling himself upright through pharmaceutical fog. Too many, Marcus whispered, his alpha pride broken by witnessing power beyond his comprehension. Constantine brought half the northern territories. Lyra swayed on her feet, the uncontrolled power surge having drained what little strength the detox had left her. I can't do that again. Not without killing them. Then we run. Darius's strategic mind was reasserting itself despite the drugs. Emergency protocols. Get us to the safe house. But even as he spoke, explosion sounds from multiple directions indicated that their escape routes were being systematically eliminated. Constantine wasn't taking any chances, he'd planned for every contingency except the one that had just occurred. A true Omega who could weaponize trauma itself. Outside, Alpha Constantine's voice boomed through a megaphone, King Darius. Your position is hopeless. Surrender the Omega, and your people will be spared. Lyra met Darius's eyes across the wreckage of the medical wing. Both of them knew the truth, surrender meant death for her and political destruction for him. But fighting meant casualties among innocent pack members who'd served loyally for generations. There's another option, she said quietly. No. You don't even know what I was going to suggest. Darius's smile was grim and knowing. You want to use your full power. Drop every barrier and let your Omega nature loose on the entire siege force. She nodded. It would end this. It would also probably kill you. And definitely kill most of them. His hand found hers, warm despite everything they faced. I won't let you become the monster they think you are. Even if it saves your kingdom. Especially then. Around them, the sounds of battle grew closer as Constantine's forces systematically breached the compound's defenses. Soon they would run out of options entirely. But in that moment, surrounded by enemies and betrayed by friends, Darius made a choice that would echo through supernatural history. He would not sacrifice the woman he was coming to love for the crown he'd worn for centuries. Even if it cost him everything. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The blood moon hung over the Blackthorn compound like an omen, casting everything in crimson light that made shadows dance with malevolent life. Darius had seen dozens of lunar eclipses in his 3 centuries, but none had ever felt this apocalyptic. From their defensive position in the compound's central tower, he watched Lyra pace the reinforced chamber with predatory restlessness. The detox process had accelerated dramatically in the last 6 hours, her body purging years of wolfsbane with violent efficiency. She should have been weak, recovering, grateful for sanctuary. Instead, she radiated power that made the air itself feel electric. How many? She asked without turning from the window, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Lyra. How many wolves herd Omegas in the pack surrounding us right now? This time she did turn, and Darius felt his blood freeze. Her eyes, once a warm amber, now held flecks of silver that seemed to swirl with their own inner light. I can smell their guilt from here. Through their strengthening bond, he felt her hunger. Not for food or comfort, but for justice delivered in the most brutal terms possible. It was a craving that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. The immediate threat is Constantine's forces, Darius said carefully. We need to focus on Constantine. She spoke the name like a curse. Yes, I know about Alpha Constantine. His pack Omega suicide rate is 40% higher than the territorial average. Did you know that? I didn't, until an hour ago. Now I know everything about him. Darius's warrior instinct screamed warnings. This wasn't the broken, frightened girl he'd claimed 2 days ago. This was something else entirely, something that wore Lyra's face but looked at the world through the lens of accumulated rage. How could you possibly know? I can taste their memories in the air. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Every Omega who suffered. Every Alpha who allowed it. Every Beta who looked the other way. When she opened her eyes again, they were completely silver. They all have to pay. Before Darius could respond, his communications officer's voice crackled through the tactical radio. Your Majesty, we have a situation. The Northern Territory's forward scouts, they're dead, sir. All 12 of them. Darius felt the blood drain from his face. Explain. Throats torn out, but it wasn't a standard wolf attack. Something made them shift back to human form before they died. They were found naked, kneeling, with expressions of absolute terror. Through the bond, Darius felt Lyra's savage satisfaction. She hadn't left the tower room in hours, but somehow 12 enemy scouts were dead. That's impossible, he whispered. Lyra smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression he'd ever seen. A true Omega's power isn't limited by physical proximity, my king. Not when we're properly motivated. The radio crackled again. Sir, there's more. We're getting reports from the coastal packs. 3 of their Omega handlers are dead, killed in their sleep 50 miles from here. And from the Western Alliance, 2 pack enforcers found dismembered in their own territory. Darius stared at Lyra in horror. You're killing them. Only the guilty ones. Her tone was conversational, as if they were discussing weather. The ones who hurt innocent Omegas. I can sense them, you see. Their crimes leave a particular stench. Lyra, you need to stop this. Stop. Her voice rose to a shriek that made the windows rattle. I've been stopped my entire life. Stopped from fighting back, stopped from defending myself, stopped from being anything more than a victim. Power rolled off her in waves that made Darius's knees buckle. No more stopping. She turned back to the window, and Darius felt her attention focus on something in the distance. Through their bond, he caught a glimpse of her target, a beta wolf in Constantine's camp who had a history of disciplining Omega servants with sexual violence. No. Darius reached for her, but she was already extending her supernatural influence across the battlefield. Miles away, Beta Crawford suddenly shifted to human form in the middle of his guard duty. He tried to resist, tried to shift back, but Lyra's power held him locked in vulnerable flesh as she reached into his mind and showed him every moment of pain he'd ever inflicted on helpless Omegas. The screams that echoed across the compound were audible even at this distance. Stop this. Darius roared, his own alpha power flaring as he tried to break through her bloodthirsty focus. But when Lyra turned toward him, he saw something that chilled him to the bone. She wasn't just hunting the guilty, she was enjoying it. The trauma that had been suppressed for years was expressing itself as calculated sadism. They deserve it, she said simply. All of them. Every alpha who thinks Omegas exist for their pleasure. Every beta who enables the abuse. Every gamma who stays silent. Her silver eyes fixed on him with laser intensity. Every king who built his throne on a system that treats my kind as disposable. Darius felt the accusation like a physical blow. How many Omegas had suffered in territories under his protection? How many abuses had he ignored in the name of political stability? Through the bond, Lyra sensed his guilt and smiled. You see? Even you know the truth. The entire pack system is built on our oppression. So I'm going to tear it all down. The communications officer's voice returned, more panicked now. Your Majesty, we're getting reports from all over the continent. Omega abusers are dying, dozens of them. They're all connected somehow. The deaths started here and are spreading outward like ripples. Darius closed his eyes, finally understanding the true horror of what was happening. Lyra wasn't just using her power to defend herself. She was conducting a supernatural genocide against anyone who'd ever harmed an Omega. And with each death, her hunger seemed to grow stronger. This is why they hunted us to extinction, came a whisper through the bond. But it wasn't Lyra's mental voice, it was something older, darker, speaking through her. Not because we were valuable weapons, but because we become monsters when pushed too far. Lyra, listen to me. Darius approached her slowly, the way he might approach a rabid wolf. This isn't you. This is the trauma talking. Isn't it? She tilted her head with predatory curiosity. Or maybe this is who I was always meant to be. Maybe every true Omega was meant to be the reckoning for your kind's sins. Through the bond, images flashed, memories that weren't quite memories. Other true Omegas from centuries past, driven to madness by systematic abuse until they became engines of destruction. Entire packs wiped out by Omega vengeance. Cities burned. Bloodlines ended. The old stories hadn't called them true Omegas because they were perfect mates. They'd called them true Omegas because they were truth incarnate, the inevitable consequence of treating an entire subspecies as expendable. My God, Darius breathed. The extinction wasn't murder. It was self-defense. Finally understanding, my king? Lyra's smile was sharp as a blade. Your ancestors didn't hunt us for our power. They hunted us because we were too dangerous to let live. One traumatized true Omega could end civilization. The radio crackled with increasingly frantic reports. The death count was rising exponentially as Lyra's supernatural rage spread across the continent like a plague. Soon it wouldn't just be the obviously guilty, it would be anyone who'd ever looked the other way, anyone who'd ever benefited from the system that allowed Omega abuse. Within hours, it would be everyone. There has to be another way, Darius said desperately. There is. Lyra's voice was suddenly soft, almost vulnerable. But you won't like it. Through the bond, she showed him the answer. A true mate bond, not the surface connection they shared now, but the complete joining of souls that would anchor her humanity to his. It was theoretically possible, but the cost was staggering. A true mate bond would require him to surrender his alpha nature completely. He would become her equal rather than her king, sharing power instead of wielding it alone. Every enemy who'd ever feared his strength would see him as vulnerable. Every ally who'd sworn loyalty to his crown might abandon him for a stronger leader. He would lose everything that made him who he was. But without that anchor, Lyra would continue killing until there were no wolves left alive. The choice is yours, she whispered, though her eyes remained silver and inhuman. Your throne, or your species. Outside, the blood moon seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. In the distance, more screams echoed as Lyra's power found new targets. The communications officer reported that Omega abusers as far away as Alaska and Mexico were dying simultaneously, their guilty minds unable to withstand the psychic assault of accumulated trauma given supernatural form. Darius closed his eyes and thought about Marcus, his friend for 2 centuries who'd betrayed him out of fear. About Vincent Thorne, who'd sold his own daughter's pain for political advantage. About every alpha who'd built their power on the broken backs of Omegas too weak to fight back. Maybe they all deserved what was coming. But the innocent didn't. The children didn't. The Omegas themselves, who would be left alone in a world without wolves to protect them from other predators. Choose quickly, Fenris urged. She's losing herself completely. Through their bond, Darius felt Lyra's humanity slipping away like sand through his fingers. Soon there would be nothing left but vengeance incarnate, and the massacre would continue until the last wolf drew breath. He opened his eyes and looked at the woman who'd become both his salvation and his damnation. Show me how. Lyra's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been relief. Are you certain? Once we complete a true mate bond, there's no going back. You'll never be the Alpha King again. I was never meant to rule alone, he said quietly, finally understanding a truth that had taken 3 centuries to learn. I was meant to rule with you. She nodded and extended her hand. When their fingers touched, Darius felt the first stirrings of a transformation that would either save the world or damn them both. Outside, the blood moon reached its zenith, and the screaming stopped. For now. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. Dawn broke over a battlefield that looked like the aftermath of divine wrath. Bodies littered the compound grounds, not torn apart by claws or fangs, but whole, peaceful, as if they'd simply chosen to stop breathing. The guilty had paid their price under the blood moon, and the survivors huddled in terrified clusters, waiting to learn if they would see another sunset. Lyra stood in the center of it all, her bare feet planted on ground that was dark with blood. Vincent Thorne's corpse lay at her feet, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Her former alpha, the man who'd tortured her for years, who'd poisoned her own body against her, had died screaming her name. She felt nothing. The rage that had consumed her for hours had burned itself out, leaving behind a hollowness that scared her more than the fury ever had. Through the true mate bond, she could feel Darius approaching from behind, his footsteps unsteady on the blood-soaked earth. "It's over," he said quietly. Lyra didn't turn around. "Is it?" "Look around, Darius. This is what I am. This is what I've always been." She gestured at the carnage with one trembling hand. "A monster wearing the face of a victim. You're not a monster." His voice was rough with exhaustion, and when she finally turned to look at him, her heart clenched with fear. The true mate bond was slowly killing him. Every day since they'd forged the connection, she could feel his alpha strength flowing into her, keeping her tethered to sanity at the cost of his own life force. The strong, vital man who'd claimed her was fading. Dark circles shadowed his silver eyes, and his powerful frame looked diminished, as if something essential was being drained away drop by drop. "Aren't I?" She stepped over Vincent's body without a second glance. 37 wolves died last night, Darius. 37, because I decided they deserved punishment. Who gave me that right? Who made me judge and executioner? They were guilty. Some of them. The admission tasted bitter. But some were just convenient. Some died because they were in the wrong place when my power reached out, searching for targets. Some died because they'd made mistakes years ago that they'd been trying to atone for ever since. Through their bond, she felt his shock as he realized the truth. In her supernatural rage, she hadn't been discriminating between active abusers and wolves who'd simply been complicit in a broken system. The line between justice and vengeance had blurred beyond recognition. "Lyra. Look at yourself." She reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the sharp lines of exhaustion that hadn't been there a week ago. "You're dying because of me. The bond that's keeping me human is killing the only person who ever saw worth in my brokenness." Darius caught her hand, pressing it firmly against his cheek. "I made that choice willingly. And I'm making mine now." Before he could ask what she meant, the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air. The surviving Alpha armies, what remained after last night's supernatural purge, were converging for what everyone knew would be the final confrontation. Alpha Constantine himself led the procession, his massive frame moving with the careful precision of a predator who'd learned to fear his prey. Behind him marched the remnants of 3-pack armies, perhaps 400 wolves total. Not enough to storm the compound by force, but more than enough to ensure that any negotiation would be conducted from a position of strength. "King Darius," Constantine called out, his voice carrying easily across the blood-stained courtyard. "I think it's time we discuss terms." Lyra felt the familiar stirring of power in her chest, the urge to reach out and crush every guilty mind in the approaching army. It would be so easy. One focused burst of Omega dominance, and the threat would end forever. But she also felt Darius weaken further as the bond prepared to channel that much raw power. Another display like last night's massacre might kill him outright. "No terms," she called back, stepping forward to put herself between Darius and the approaching alphas. "You want me? Come and take me." Constantine's laugh was genuinely amused. Bold words from someone who's slowly murdering her own mate. "Yes, we know about true mate bonds, little Omega. We know that every day you resist surrender is another day closer to his death." The words hit her like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Through their connection, she could feel Darius's life force as clearly as her own heartbeat, and both were growing weaker. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple. You come with us willingly, allow us to study your abilities, help us understand how true Omega power can be contained and controlled. In exchange, we release the bond killing your king and allow you both to live." "Contained and controlled," Lyra repeated flatly. "You mean imprisoned and experimented on?" "Semantics." Constantine shrugged. "The alternative is that you both die here, him from the bond drain, you from the inevitable breakdown that happens when true Omegas lose their anchors to humanity. Either way, your threat to our way of life ends." Behind her, Darius struggled to his feet. "The answer is no. I wasn't asking you, dead man walking." Constantine's attention remained fixed on Lyra. This is her choice to make. And suddenly, Lyra understood. They weren't here to capture her or kill her. They were here to offer her the one thing that would destroy her more completely than any prison, a false hope of saving Darius. "You're lying," she said quietly. "About being able to break the bonds safely. There's no way to undo a true mate connection without killing both parties." "Perhaps. But there is another option." Constantine smiled, and it was the expression of a wolf who'd cornered his prey. "You could break your Omega power entirely. Burn it out of your system in one massive release, severing the supernatural connection while leaving the emotional bond intact." Lyra felt her heart stop. "That's impossible." "Is it? You've been learning to control your abilities through trauma and rage. But power flows both ways, little Omega. You can push it outward to destroy others, or you can turn it inward and destroy the source. One final act of Omega dominance, directed at yourself, would shatter the supernatural aspects of your nature while leaving you, human. Mortal. Powerless." Through the bond, she felt Darius's horror at the suggestion. But she also felt something else, the faint stirring of hope. If she burned out her power, the drain on his life force would stop. He would recover, reclaim his throne, continue the work of ruling that he'd done for 3 centuries. All it would cost was everything that made her special. "And if I refuse?" "Then we wait." Constantine's smile never wavered. "A few more days, perhaps a week. Your king dies from the bond drain, you go insane from losing your anchor, and we clean up the mess. Either way, the threat ends." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. She could embrace her true Omega nature fully, become the immortal force of vengeance that her power wanted her to be. But that meant letting Darius die and becoming the very monster the old stories had warned about. Or she could break her power permanently, save the man she loved, and spend the rest of her mortal life as exactly what her father had always called her, broken goods. Through the bond, she felt Darius's desperate attempt to reach her mentally. "Don't you dare," his voice whispered in her mind. "Don't sacrifice yourself for me." But that was exactly what love meant, wasn't it? Sacrifice. The willingness to give up everything that defined you for the sake of someone who mattered more than your own identity. "I'm sorry," she whispered back. "But you saved me first. Now it's my turn." Before Darius could stop her, Lyra reached deep into the well of power that had defined her existence since birth. Instead of directing it outward toward her enemies, she turned every ounce of true Omega dominance inward, toward the supernatural core of her own being. The pain was indescribable. It felt like tearing out her own soul and setting it on fire. But beneath the agony, she felt the true mate bond shift and change as the supernatural connection dissolved, leaving behind only the emotional ties that bound her heart to Darius's. Power poured out of her in waves, not destructive this time but transformative. The ground beneath her feet bloomed with impossible colors as raw Omega energy sought new forms of expression. Flowers that had never existed pushed through the blood-soaked earth, and the very air shimmered with potential. When it was over, Lyra collapsed to her knees, gasping. The silver was gone from her eyes, replaced by warm amber. The supernatural strength that had defined her was gone, leaving behind something she'd never experienced before, simple, mortal humanity. "It's done," she whispered, and her voice carried no supernatural command. She was just a woman now, scarred and tired and completely ordinary. But through their still intact emotional bond, she felt Darius's life force surge back to full strength, his alpha nature reasserting itself as the supernatural drain ended. Constantine stared at her in shock. You actually did it. You chose powerlessness. I chose love. Lyra struggled to her feet, swaying slightly as she adjusted to her new mortality. Something you'll never understand. The assembled alphas looked uncertain now. They'd come prepared to face a supernatural weapon of mass destruction. Instead, they found themselves confronting a woman who just made the ultimate sacrifice for someone else's life. She's harmless now, one of Constantine's lieutenants observed. Just another broken Omega. Is she? Darius's voice cut through the morning air like a blade, and every wolf present felt the full weight of his restored alpha power. Because I see something else entirely. He moved to stand beside Lyra, his renewed strength evident in every step. I see a woman who commanded the respect of armies, who brought the supernatural world to its knees, who made kings and alphas tremble with fear, and who gave it all up to save one life. His silver eyes swept over the assembled wolves with dangerous intensity. That's not powerlessness. That's the strongest thing I've ever witnessed. Constantine shifted uncomfortably. Be that as it may, she's no longer a threat to. No longer a threat? Darius's laugh was genuinely amused. Look around you, Alpha Constantine. Look at what she created when she sacrificed her power. For the first time, the assembled wolves truly saw what Lyra's final act had wrought. The compound grounds, which minutes before had been a blood-soaked battlefield, were now carpeted with impossible beauty. Flowers in colors that had no names grew in patterns that seemed almost sentient. The very air hummed with life force so pure it made every wolf present feel stronger, healthier, more whole. She didn't just break her power, Darius continued quietly. She transformed it into something entirely new. She chose creation over destruction, healing over vengeance, love over fear. He looked down at Lyra with expression of absolute devotion. That's not powerlessness. That's evolution. As if responding to his words, the flowers began to spread beyond the compound walls, carrying their healing energy toward the territories where Omega abusers had died in the night. Where there had been death, new life would grow. Where there had been trauma, there would be beauty. Lyra had found a way to make her final act of power serve healing instead of harm. Impossible, Constantine breathed. Nothing's impossible when you choose love over power, Lyra said softly. She took Darius's hand, feeling the warmth of his restored strength. I learned that from someone who gave up his crown to save my sanity. Around them, the supernatural army began to disperse. Without a true Omega to capture or contain, their mission had become meaningless. More importantly, they could all sense that something fundamental had shifted in the supernatural world, that the age of power through domination was ending, replaced by something they didn't yet understand. As the last of the enemy vehicles disappeared over the horizon, Darius and Lyra stood together in their garden of impossible flowers, mortal and immortal, human and wolf, two damaged souls who'd found wholeness in choosing each other over everything else the world had offered. Do you regret it? Darius asked quietly. Giving up what made you special? Lyra smiled, and it was the first completely peaceful expression he'd ever seen on her face. I didn't give up what made me special. I gave up what made me dangerous. There's a difference. She was right, he realized. Standing there surrounded by the beauty she'd created, mortal and scarred and utterly human, she was more powerful than she'd ever been as a true Omega. Because now her power came from choice instead of trauma, from love instead of rage, from hope instead of vengeance. And that, Darius thought as he pulled her into his arms, was the kind of power that could truly change the world. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.